That was healing. God was looking after us when God sent us you, Stephen. Thank you. Amen. Isn't that the best prayer? Amen. So, starting with a story. A man buys a Bugatti sports car and walks into the Catholic Church where he was confirmed as a child, and he asks his priest for a blessing for it. And the priest says, "What's a Bugatti?" And the fellow says, "It's a very expensive European automobile. I'd like a blessing to protect it." And the Catholic priest says, "We don't bless automobiles. Well, you could try the Episcopalians. They're just down the street." So the guy wanders down and asks for a blessing from the priest at St. Michael and All Angels Episcopal. And the priest says, "What's a Bugatti? Is that like a Ferrari?" The fellow scoffs and says, "No, this is a top-of-the-line European sports car." And the priest says, "Sorry, we don't bless cars. But you might try the Presbyterians. They're just around the corner." So the guy wanders around the corner and finds the church and the pastor and makes his request. And the minister says, "Wow, a Bugatti. Could I have a ride? By the way, what's a blessing?" Which is by way of saying that we Presbyterians don't use the word bless or bless you very much. It's in fact, if you get an email from me that says bless you, you know it's a scam, right? Say, "Please buy gift cards in the amount of $2,000. I just can't get around to it today. Bless you." Right. So we don't use that word, but we do believe that blessing is central to living. Being blessed is a very important concept, even if we think the word stilted or archaic. Well, Jacob in this morning's story longs for a blessing and asks God for it, or God's representative for it. It's a little cloudy in the story. There is in blessing such a formal sense of acceptance. So the idea I'm working with here is simply that before you or I can nurture and love one another, we have to have the experience of being loved by something or someone bigger than we are. We need and long, in fact, to feel blessed by them in some way. That's why God sets us in families, flawed as they are, to teach us the value of unconditional love, and that is what blessing is all about at bottom. Whether our families love us well or fill us with the emptiness of not being blessed or loved well, we find out that love is the central thing regardless. So I want us to look into the Hebrew Testament story of Jacob and his brother Esau and their adventures with their parents to see how important this business of being blessed by our parents really is. You may remember the shyster Jacob. If you don't, no worries. Here's how the story of his family plays out. First off, Jacob buys his brother Esau's birthright, remember, for a bowl of soup. It's in the Bible. His brother, the firstborn and rightful heir, was super hungry one day, and not being the brightest bulb on the block, he trades his birthright away to his younger brother for next to nothing. And then Jacob, with his mother's help, story number 2, Jacob's his mother's favorite, He steals the final blessing of his dying father, which the father Isaac means to give to Esau, his favorite of the two brothers. So Isaac, in the story, sends his older son Esau out to hunt game to make a stew as a precondition of that final blessing. And then in the meantime, Jacob pretends to be his brother and offers his blind father something his mother has cooked up weeks before and warms up in a jiffy in a microwave. But it will take quite a feat to make his father believe he's his brother. Because, his brother is as hairy as Sasquatch, and Jacob is as smooth as a china cup. Well, Jacob takes a couple of sheepskins, and he attaches them to his forearms, knowing his father will suspect he might be angling for his hairy brother's blessing. Well, his father feels Jacob's arms and pronounces him Esau. How anybody can mistake a sheepskin for a hairy forearm is beyond belief, but we'll just let that one ride. Anyway, the father Isaac pronounces a gorgeous blessing on Jacob. And Jacob goes his way, and not 5 minutes later, poor Esau shows up with his stew made from a fresh kill. And Isaac, the dad, trembles, realizing how he has been duped and how it's too late to undo the blessing. And Esau is inconsolable. He says, "Have you not reserved at least one blessing for me?" Now, this is one of the most poignant parts of the Bible. So let me ask you, are you anything like Esau? Did you get your parents' blessing, or did you miss out on it altogether? Some parents don't have it in them to bless their children. They just don't. Remember Carol Burnett? Of course you do. Since early childhood, she was very conscious of her looks. Her mother said she had, quote, the Burnett lower lip, meaning she had no chin. Trouble was, no one else in her family had the trait. Poor Carol had beautiful parents, pretty aunts, handsome uncles. She had a cousin who was a homecoming queen at UCLA, for God's sake. And Carol found herself labeled Andy Gump and Gopher Face. Her mother would look at her and say, "You probably got your buck teeth from sucking your thumb so much." Carol once told this of her mother. She thought she made me feel better when she told me, quote, "It's great that you can draw, so because no matter what you look like, you can always be an artist." You hear the pain in that? So she set out for a life in comedy because, quote, "when you laugh, it doesn't hurt so much." Having put that out there, now I want to ask you, who gave you that special sparkle when you were growing up? Was it your father, or your mom, sister, cousin, grandparent maybe, your neighbor, your fourth grade teacher? And what is a blessing anyway in this day and age? How should parents parent? Well, consider this following attempt at parenting. You may know that there are summer camps for very affluent children located mostly in New England and in the Hamptons and Maine. Now, these aren't the kind of camps you and I went to when we were kids. These camps cost an average of $15,000 a week. No kidding. Now, what do you get for that? You get a full-time parent liaison. This is sort of a parent substitute who will keep the parents updated on how happy their kids are or are not when they're away from them. This person is more like a hotel concierge than a t-shirt wearing camp counselor with a whistle. He or she will request the parents ship some of their children's belongings weeks in advance of the camp so that they can make the campers' beds just right, and have things sufficiently familiar and home-like before the kids arrive. That's not all. Near the end of camp, many of the parents fly in for Parents' Day, spending $30,000 to $40,000 for a chartered flight. Well, these are parents who have a diagnosable disease. It's called affluenza, right? Too much money, maybe too little sense. They're parents who send their kids to camp with 2 or more smartphones, knowing that in the middle of the week, one of them is going to be confiscated. They're what we call helicopter folks. Helicopter parents, always hovering, which has nothing to do with blessing. And consider this too. Sometimes the blessing skips a generation. Let me explain. The late, well-known pastor from Seattle, Bruce Larson, was absolutely stunned years ago by the extravagant love his mother showed his children. No more caring grandmother ever lived. But Bruce was forever frustrated because he spent his lifetime carting home to her his trophies, his new books, his jobs that were fantastic one after the other, his awards, and she never seemed interested in him, her own son. It depressed the heck out of him. His kids intervened. They counseled him. They said, "Leave Grandma alone. She doesn't like herself very much, and you're too close for her to like you very much either. So quit playing your life to her, Dad. It's a no-win deal." And Bruce eventually took their advice. He realized that all his adult life he had been making himself a victim of her inability to value him. And in time, he came to rejoice that the parent who could not bring herself to accept her own child could grow into the grandparent who could, in fact, bless her grandchildren richly. And Bruce, to his credit, came to see as well that it was that very woundedness he carried all his life that opened his heart to a whole world of people he recognized as soulmates. Others who felt they too had missed something critical when it came to growing up. Something clicked for me as I've been thinking about this issue of blessing. Parents rescue their children. Sometimes they have to. But grandparents are more often refuges for them. Think about that. Maybe this is as it should be. You're lucky if in a lifetime you get to be both parent and grandparent and great-grandparent, right, Bob? Twice, I was fortunate to have spent a little time with Mahatma Gandhi's grandson, Arun Gandhi, who passed away just very, very recently. The first time was in Ashland, and when I saw him years later in Salt Lake City, he repeated a wonderful story I'd heard the first time and was glad to be reminded of. Arun was raised by his father, who was Mahatma Gandhi's son, on an ashram outside of the city of Durban in South Africa. But it wasn't a place of peace, as you'd imagine. He said he was beaten and harassed by other boys his age around the time of middle school. Some beat him up because he was too dark, and others because he was too white. It made him angry. I remember him saying that anger is like electricity. It can be useful, but it also can be very dangerous. His parents, who were wonderful parents, ran out of patience with him, and in order to help him deal with his own anger, his parents sent him to live with his grandfather, Gandhi, in India for most of a period of 18 months when he was around the age of 12. His grandfather, Mahatma Gandhi, was already world famous by this time. He lived in an ashram in India, of course, and raised money by selling his autograph at 5 rupees a pop, about $6 now. He put Arun, his grandson, in charge of collecting the autograph books and the 5 rupee charge at the time of the daily Hindu worship and audience with the Mahatma. Now, Arun, in the process, decided he too wanted his grandfather's autograph. So he submitted his own autograph book one day. His grandfather asked where the 5 rupees were for the book. And Arun told him he himself was the one who submitted it. And Gandhi said, "No money, no autograph." And he mandated that Arun not ask his mother for it. Arun had to earn it himself. Well, Arun took this as a challenge. So when his grandfather was in meetings with important politicians like Prime Minister Nehru, he would barge in with a pen and autograph book and insist on an autograph. He had put his grandfather in a compromising situation, but his grandfather would not come across with the autograph at all. And instead, Gandhi would put his hand over his grandson's mouth and wrestle his head, lovingly kind of stifling him. The prime minister said, "Just give him the signature and get rid of him." And Gandhi said, "This is a family matter. Let me handle it my own way." And Arun said that in the 18 months he was with his grandfather, he never ever got the autograph. But he appreciated that his grandfather never once sent him away in anger and loved the heck out of him the whole time. And he said in time he saw that the treatment he got from his grandfather was very special and in its own way a blessing beyond any autograph, of course. In most cases, our parents and grandparents give us more of their hearts than any of us ever know. That's the nature of family love. It's a lovely thing when we wake up a little and realize that very thing, and then resolve to pay it forward with our own children, grandchildren, nephews, nieces, whatever, whether we have children of our own or not. I love also how the poet Billy Collins deals with that recognition, that waking up, in his poem, The Lanyard. You may know it. It's an apt way to close a sermon on a Mother's Day, I think. So here it is, The Lanyard. The other day, as I was ricocheting slowly off the blue walls of this room, bouncing from typewriter to piano, from bookshelf to an envelope lying on the floor, I found myself in the L section of the dictionary where my eyes fell upon the word lanyard. No cookie nibbled by a French novelist could send one more suddenly into the past. A past where I sat at a workbench at a camp by a deep Adirondack lake, learning how to braid thin plastic strips into a lanyard, a gift for my mother. I'd never seen anyone use a lanyard, or wear one if that's what you did with them. But that did not keep me from crossing strand over strand again and again until I had made a boxy red and white lanyard for my mother. She gave me life and milk from her breasts, and I gave her a lanyard. She nursed me in many a sick room, lifted teaspoons of medicine to my lips, set gold faith claws on my forehead, then led me out into the airy light and taught me to walk and swim. And I, in turn, presented her with a lanyard. Here are thousands of meals, she said, and here is clothing and a good education. And here is your lanyard, I replied, which I made with a little help from a counselor. Here is a breathing body and a beating heart, strong legs, bones and teeth, and 2 clear eyes to read the world, she whispered. And here, I said, is the lanyard I made at camp. And here, I wish to say to her now, is a smaller gift, not the archaic truth that you can never repay your mother, but the rueful admission that when she took the 2-toned lanyard from my hands, I was as sure as a boy could be that this useless, worthless thing I wove out of boredom would be enough to make us even. Amen.